So now that we have our internal controls written and we have those in place, let's talk about forming our budget for the coming year. Everybody should have a budget, whether it's at home, whether it's in the business, whether it's in our local church or any other nonprofit, state government, federal government. It doesn't matter. A budget is simply a plan of how we think we're going to spend our money to accomplish the goals to start out. So there's got to be some strategic planning. We've got to start with the vision. Now, this does not belong to the Finance Committee. This belongs to the Admin Council, but we as finance people have got to be a part of that. We should begin to think through things like, where do we want to be in 10 years? We want to be a church that does thus and so because we believe God's calling us there. So in 10 years, we'd like to be here. So what do we need to be doing in 8 years, in 3 years? What do we do next year to accomplish that vision of where we want to be in 10 years? How do we want to impact our community and the gospel? How do we want to impact our community and how do we spread the gospel? I call that the Christmas story concept. I love to ask finance committees, so if you invite me in, get ready. I love to ask finance committees and admin councils, what would your community miss? What would they not have today if you never existed? Remember George Bailey asking that question as he stood on the edge of the bridge and wanted to jump off? And Gabriel, the little angel, I think was his name, he said, but what are you going to do? You'll never exist. And what is going to be missed? And he went through and he saw all those things. If your church cannot claim the ministry it's doing and be proud of that ministry, then as Bishop Swanson says, it's a sad day when the frog doesn't croak loud enough in the pond for the people to know what the frog did. I think it's something like that. You may need to ask the bishop kind of how he says that. But that's close, that's close. You know, you got to croak, you got to tell what's going on in your area. What's your community going to miss should you not exist? So as you begin to think about that, where do we want to be? What is the community missing should we never exist? That tells us what kind of church we want to be and how we move forward. That's just strategic planning, and that's led by the Admin Council. We've got to develop a mission statement. We included the purpose of the organization. Why do we exist? I'll give you an example. The mission of the United Methodist Church is simply this, paragraph 120 in the discipline. The mission of the church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. I love the second sentence, and that's why I want you to think about this example. Local churches provide the most significant arena through which disciple making occurs. Paragraph 120 recognizes it very clearly that the mission of the local church is to make disciples in their community. It's the mission of the United Methodist Church to make disciples of Jesus Christ to transform the world. How does the general church, the jurisdiction, the conference, the district work to help the local church make those disciples in their own area? Remember, the process is just as valuable as the outcome. Without a process, we're not going to hit the mark we're working toward. So admin councils, admin chair, I know you're listening because you're a part of the committee. So admin chairs, say to the council, we've got to do some strategic planning. We've got to ask ourselves, what are the opportunities or needs we exist to address? What's our purpose? What are we doing to address those needs? That's our business. And what are the principles or beliefs that guide our work? That's the values. What is non-negotiable? We've got to do these things if we're going to be the church God's calling us to be, that's going to make a difference in the community, that's going to make disciples, so that we transform the world as God's called us to do. So the importance of budgeting is really simple. It formalizes your planning. Once I have a budget, I follow my plans. It helps me do that. It reduces the drama. Oh, if we don't do this, we're not going to be a good church. We're not going to be remembered. We've got to do this. Forget the budget. You know, I could come in and make a case for some ministry going on and probably shake every penny loose you've got in your budget for benevolence, if not the whole budget itself. You don't want drama to do that. You want the call of God to do that. We got to provide a way to evaluate the performance. Now, evaluation is very important, but not spending money is just as bad as spending too much money. Think about it. We've got a Bible school and a church of 80-year-olds. There's a budget of $1,000, and we only spent $20. Well, is that a good thing that we saved $980? Not really. You know why they put $1,000 in that budget to begin with? They're in a community of apartments. There are kids everywhere around the church. And so they saw their responsibility, one of their responsibilities is to have a Bible school that brings in the neighborhood kids, that introduces them to Jesus, that allows them a way to do ministry, to make disciples. And where the kids go, the parents are going to eventually end up there. So if you think about it, the evaluation of that $1,000 and only spending $20 can be one of two things. We allocated too much money, there was only one child in the neighborhood, but we had a great Bible school with $20, or we did a lousy job because we didn't even have Bible school. We used the $20 to pay for the coffee when the committee talked about Bible school and voted not to have one. So you see, the numbers don't tell the story. The numbers allow the story to be told in what we did and how we spent those gracious gifts. It provides a way to evaluate performance, and it's a method for control and authorization to spend. Be very careful. When you set a budget, then determine who has authority to spend that money. The treasurer doesn't need to make decisions, should I spend it, should I not spend it. The treasurer should know, here's a bill, that's the electric bill. Who's responsible for paying the electric bill? Well, it's the trustees, and so trustee will sign off on this. I go to the trustee and I get approval for that. Bible school, Sunday school material, choir material, whatever I'm spending, I need to know who has the authority to sign off on it, because that person then becomes the person that watches the budget to be sure we're only spending what we're allocated, and yet we're spending it in the best way possible to do the work. So it allows us a method for control and authorization to spend. And it helps with the communication. If I've got a budget, I can tell the story of what we're doing. A budget on an Excel spreadsheet is really great for us numbers people. It's really lousy for a communicator. A communicator is going to say, here's the ministry we're doing. Here's the stories that tell how we've made a difference. Here's how we are changing God's world through God's work. And we only spend X number of dollars doing so. You see, a communicator can take your budget, turn it into a wonderful Word document, use your good numbers, tell the story, the gracious giver say, wow, I want to be a part. Let me give to that budget. It gets members involved. If the members of the various committees are working together to say, this is what we believe we need to do and this is the amount of money that we need, then not only have they made the decision of what they're going to do, but they've made the decision of what it's going to cost. And so then if we get into the evaluation process and we say, why did you overspend or why did you underspend, then the people that made the decision will work with that and say, wow, we had a little more we could have spent. We could have had more than just coffee for the committee. We could have had a real Bible school at that point. So you help people get involved, because the more involvement I have in setting the budget, the greater the commitments are going to be. If I believe in what we're doing, I will give. And if I can read it and see it, I will give. It gives members confidence in leadership. People give because they trust the leadership to do what the leadership says they're going to do based on what the driving group has said we're going to do. If you've got somebody you don't trust, last time I saw old Joe Blow on the committee or Susie Do-Right on the committee for this not-for-profit, they spent all the money in the wrong way and now they're head of our church finances. I think I'll give my money elsewhere. No. You know, that chair of finance has always done what they're supposed to do. Were you in the admin council meeting when the chair of finance said, we hear what you're asking us for and we're going to go back and get that done for you? And then they come back and produce a report that shows they did what they were asked to do. People will give when they trust the leadership leading the church. That involves finance, that involves admin council, that involves trustees, pastor parish, and anybody else you can name. People give in relationship to the trust in the leadership. Now, it also helps us address low cash flow times. Y'all know what happens. Summer comes, we spend a whole lot more money in the summer because the kids aren't in school, we got Bible school going on, we got youth events going on, it's time to paint the building, we got all these things we're going to do, and everybody went on vacation and forgot to stop by the church and leave their money. So what you got to do, Stewardship Committee, is convince folks when you get ready to go on vacation, drop off the money at the church, make your contribution for the month, and then go on vacation. I promise you, when they get back from vacation, they're not going to bring what's left over by, because what's left over normally are the charge slips for the gas that they bought. So, help people know that we've got to live into low cash flow times. So in January, February, when we're receiving nice donations, put some aside, have it in savings, because we know we're going to need it in the summer because it's going to replenish itself in the fall. That's called managing the funds. Remember, that's one of our responsibilities. And it allows us to borrow prudently. Never borrow money, whether it's from yourself or from the bank, unless you have to. It's fine to borrow money to build a building. It's fine to borrow money for capital expenditures because that's something that happens every 5, 10, 15, 20 years. What's not good is to borrow money from the bank to operate on, because what I just did is I took a low cash flow with high expenses and added a note on top of it. That is definitely a recipe for failure. Borrow money from where you've set it aside. Begin to build some reserves, because I know in the summer I'm going to need some extra, so I'm going to borrow from myself and then I'm going to put it back. Have a plan that when I borrow it, I got a way to pay it back, and it's not going to affect the mission and ministry that God's called us to do. So that's the importance of budgeting. Now, here's some mistakes that'll happen. I want you to be careful. Not allowing enough time to properly put the budget together. Oh my gosh, this budget is due Thursday night. The district superintendent's going to be here for our admin council. We're supposed to have a budget. Take last year's budget and increase everything 10% and we'll have one. Well, you're going to increase the $1,000 Bible school budget to $1,100 and they only spent $20. Is that really what we want to do? We got to have time to put a budget together. July is not too early, which means you're probably late in starting on next year's budget. Not providing the need to spend more money, not proving the need to spend more money. I asked for $1,000 for Bible school. I only spent $20 last year. Now I'm asking for $2,000. Well, why are you asking for $2,000? Here's why. And you give the reasons why. If I can't give you reasons why, then it's perfectly all right to say, then we believe we need to bring that budget down. Not allocating enough to do the job right. Don't just get by. Do what you need to do with excellence, because who are you doing it for? For God. And if we do things with excellence, God's going to bless us. So that simply means you can't be everything to everybody. Focus in, strategically plan, determine what you're going to do, and then be sure you allocate enough to do the job right. Not being specific enough on how the money will be spent. Oh, our budget's $200,000 and we're going to spend it like it needs to be spent. Yeah, right. Tell us how much is going into programmatic. Tell us how much is going into administrative. Tell us how much is going into mission shares in the conference and the district. Remember, a detailed budget so that we can see where it's going. Be specific. And your big problem is not forecasting your available income. You know that people are going to pledge and they're going to give a certain amount. And you know, based on past history, that if people pledged $90,000, there's normally another $10,000 or $15,000 that comes in from unpledged gifts. A lot of people don't like to pledge, but they still give. So you've got to forecast how much is going to become available to us through history. History is very important in determining what's going to come into the church. Now, there are different directions you can take with budgets. You can do a top-down approach. And every direction that we're going to talk about is a good direction. And so I don't pick one and use it forever. I use them at different times. The top-down budget is a budget that's developed by the church leaders. Remember, we've got to have trust in those church leaders so that those church leaders can begin to look and figure out more efficiently what is a better view of what is the church operation so we can allocate this budget to begin with. So a top-down approach is your leadership says, here's a suggested budget, what do you think? That may work for you every 3 to 5 to 7 years. The disadvantage are members are left out of the process. And so their response can simply be, well, if the leadership knows how much money we need, let them give it. And they don't participate in the process. It's good at times, it's not good at others. So that's the top-down approach. The bottom-up approach seeks a broad-based participation in the budget development. Ask everybody. Get input. Figure out what you're going to do. Now, can you do that between now and Thursday night? Absolutely not. That's why I say budgeting may need to start in July, so that we allow the committees to meet, so that the committees say, let's do some Bible study. Let's get some people to lead us in our areas that tell us what they feel God's calling them to do. And then let's put a budget together for our areas. And then let's bring all those budgets to the Finance Committee so that the Finance Committee can put together a budget that says, here's where we are. Now, your church may be able to afford a $50,000 budget, and that request may be $150,000. Now, we don't tell everybody, cut yours back 2/3. We begin to look at it and we say, this is a great plan. This is a wonderful opportunity, but we're about $100,000 too much. Can you go back and look and see if you've missed some things? Or if you really believe that's what you need, then you need to make the case for what you need. Now, the disadvantage of this one is really simple. It is time-consuming. Start it in July, and your hope and prayer is that you'll be through with it by November at Charge Conference, so that you can report. We adopted it where? At Admin Council in October. Remember that. Then there is the incremental. Now, quite honestly, incremental is one that just takes every line item and adjusts it for cost of living. The cost of living in salaries is 2%. Let's give everybody a 2% raise. Utilities have gone up 14%. Let's increase them 14%. It's easy to put it together. It's what you kind of need for a quick fix. And quite honestly, it's probably going to be okay if you've done a lot of that bottom-up budgeting in prior years. You've got a good format. So maybe the top-down approach is your first budget, maybe even your second budget. The bottom-up, I probably do 3 or 4 years in a row. And then I might do an incremental once every 5 or 6 years as I'm going along. They're all good approaches, but remember which one you're following so that you don't leave anybody out. You don't leave any of the thought process out as you put the budget together. Get a full picture of what you expect to come in. Look at your weekly offerings. Look at restricted gifts. Look at interest on endowments. This time last year, you would have probably been expecting to get 6 or 7%. This year you may be getting 2.5%. So we've got to understand the restricted gifts and the interest that's coming in. Are we going to charge tuition for Bible school, youth events? Are we going to charge fees for using the church? We have to begin to think about that. And then what other fundraisers are we going to get into? Remember, the biggest one is stewardship, and how we help people look at what God's given them and ask them to respond in a tithing, generous way to give to the church and accomplish what God's called our church to do. Look at your weekly offerings. Do you do pledge and commitment cards? Are you using those to contact folks? Not to say how much are you going to give. The purpose of the pledge or the commitment card is the culmination of helping them understand what the upcoming budget's for, what is the ministry we're going to do, how are we going to make a difference in people's lives. Here's what it's going to cost. Will you give, and will you commit to that? 80% of your funds are going to come from 20% of your attenders. So don't get all bent out of shape if you don't get all the pledge cards back. Be sure that you're getting them back from those that want to participate, because 80% comes from 20% of the attenders, the 80-20 concept. But don't forget giving potential. Look at giving units times the average family income. If I look at giving units in the church, I'll know about how many groups will be giving. And then I can go to a lot of different statistics out there. And if you need help with that, contact the Faith Community Formation here in the conference office and ask Tim Thompson or Jason Ziebert or Jane Horseman to help you look at information in your area to determine what is family income. And once you kind of see what family income is, then that'll help you begin to think, is a 20% realistic or is it unrealistic? And then remember, there's always those folks that think they know better than God that's going to restrict their money. How do we handle that restricted money? So I got a young lady that says, I'm only giving to youth ministry because youth ministry is where I met Jesus, and I want to make sure that everybody has that opportunity. That's not trying to tell God what to do. That's trying to live into how you began your spiritual journey. So this young lady wants to give to the youth ministry. Do we require the restricted gifts to be spent first or last? If they're spent last, I'm always going to have restricted gifts sitting there. If we spend restricted gifts first, then we can give less designated money to that area, more to the area that people don't really care to give to, because it's the toilet paper fund. I heard about this one the other day. I thought it was pretty funny. I got to share it with you. Nobody wants to give to the toilet paper fund, but just let them get in that bathroom and there not be any toilet paper. Then they'll be ready to give. So if people don't want to give to the toilet paper fund, that's fine. Maybe some of those restricted gifts money that we don't need anymore in the youth fund can go to that fund. Silly example, but it does show how some things affect other things adversely. So remember those. Be aware of the games that are played inside of the finance committee, inside of the admin council, both. If you just get your foot in the door this year for just $100 is all we need to do this project. Well, David, it sounded like we needed 1,000. Oh, just start us at 100. We can get this done. If I can get my foot in the door, if I can get in that budget, I can get that $1,000 next year that I want. Getting the foot in the door. Get the pastor's blessing. Now, how you do this is real simple. Pastor is not able to meet with the finance committee on this budget discussion. So, Pastor told me, Pastor really wants us to do this program. Pastor thinks this is a great thing, so let's put it in the budget so that we can share with him. We put your favorite thing in the budget that you wanted us to do. Get the pastor's blessing. Imply that support that the pastor had or some other person in the church. These are budget games that people play. But they do it. Yeah, but they're in a whole other location. Their context is totally different than ours. God's called them to do that. They hadn't called us to do that. Here's what God's called us to do. And then the one that is going to be on the epitaph of every person, we've always done it that way. Well, we've always bought paper because we have always handed out everything in print. Well, today, we can't even go to church to see the print. We can't even see the bulletin. We can't even read the Sunday school lesson in print. But boy, does all the virtual work that we're doing come out well. Just because we've always put it on paper doesn't mean we need to put it on paper again. So be careful of the budget games people play and recognize them for what they are, and then make sure God's not calling us through what they're saying. God speaks through people you sometimes never expect God to speak through. So budgeting is important. It helps us figure out where we're going and how we're going to get there. In Finance Committee, you are not responsible for the budget. You are responsible for compiling the budget, sending it to Admin Council where it's approved, and then when it's time to change it, you send that to Admin Council with suggestions. We hadn't spent this amount here and this amount there, but we've really spent a lot of money in virtual work in the past 3 months, so could we add some more money as we figure out this, that, and the other? You see, your job, again, is raising, managing, and dispersing. If we raise it, if we manage it, if we disperse it. If we get it in, if we watch over it and we spend it, we got it made. That's your job. And budget is one of your very basic starting places.